It's the same hustle, it's the same thing, same tears on everything. Maybe one day we'll see we're one big family, like it's one.
Greetings and welcome to An American Deception. I'm your host, Red Tail Hawk, also known as Tavis Sanders. Would like to welcome our co-host, Red Silver Fox, also known as Renee Sanders.
Greetings, everyone.
I know it's been a while, but we have a couple of things lined up for y'all. If you are a subscriber to our YouTube page, then you'll have noticed that over the past few months, we've started a new series entitled Moments, where my mother gives a lot of information on specific moments in history that we would like to talk about, discuss, or even maybe just point out. So, you know, if you're not, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can check those out. And we have a couple more shows coming out for you. Today's topic is DNA, the new one-drop rule.
Okay, let's get started.
Yeah. Speaking of DNA, again, you know, we'd like to welcome my mother, Renee Silver Fox. Me and her, we were discussing this, and we found some real interesting information. You know, we're not scientists, and we want to make sure that y'all understand that first.
But we have run across this information, and we just thought it was important information to pass on to everyone.
Yeah. So, you know, you'll be able to find this information everywhere, but it's very important, and I don't think that a lot of people know this information, you know, especially from the topics of conversation that have been on the YouTube channels and some of the emails that we've been getting, and some of the questions. A lot of people have questions about this DNA testing and how it relates to your ancestry.
Yes.
You know, so we figured, hey, let's, you know, share some information with people. Let's talk about it. We're talking about DNA, and specifically DNA and genetic ancestry testing.
Yes, which is a different type of testing,
right,
using the DNA. There's several types of testing. And then really, as far as the genetic testing is concerned, there are 3 types of genetic testing. But well, let's first just discuss what the genetic testing is.
Okay.
And according to Genetics Home Reference, which is a service of the United States National Library of Medicine, and they say that genetic testing or genetic genealogy is a way for people interested in family history or their genealogy to go beyond what they can learn from relatives or from historical documentation.
Okay.
So that is what they say that genetic testing is.
Okay. So they're saying that you can use it to find more information, and you might, you know, some information you may not have been able to find in government documents.
Yes, that's
birth
correct.
certificates and stuff like that.
And also what you may not have heard from relatives.
Okay.
Or, you know, maybe something to confirm what you have heard from relatives.
Okay. So they're gonna tell us the truth.
Well, that's what people think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna see. Let's see how much truth is coming out of these DNA testing.
Right. Okay. But first of all, there are 3 different types of genetic testing.
Okay.
And well, really, it's basically 2 different types. But the third type is a type that they use from one of the types. So I'll just explain those. Okay, one type of testing is just the Y chromosome testing. And the Y chromosome testing is when they use the chromosomes that have been passed exclusively from father to son.
Okay, so they're testing your father's side.
The father's side of the family.
Okay.
So females will not be able to do this. They would have to get a male
different
relative.
test. Because we'll get to that test next.
Yes.
Okay.
Then you have mitochondrial DNA testing.
Right.
Okay. And the mitochondrial DNA testing, it provides information on the direct female ancestral line.
Okay.
So this tests the female side. Okay. Now, what is interesting though is that men do carry the mitochondrial DNA, but they do not pass it on to to their offspring.
Right.
So a male can do a mitochondrial DNA testing along with the females.
Okay.
So both male and female can do the mitochondrial testing. Okay, it's just that the males do not pass that on to the next
generation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's only transferred through the mother.
All
right. And then
in the female line.
All right. And so so we have 2 testing. We have the Y test and the mitochondrial test.
Which is the X test.
Which is the X test. Okay, so the Y test and the X test.
Right.
One test for male and one test for the female.
Right.
And then we have the 3rd test.
The 3rd test, which is called single nucleotide polymorphism.
Okay. All right.
And it's also, they call it Snp testing.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And this testing, it says it is to provide an estimate of a person's ethnic background by observing ancestral markers or mutations, which are little changes that occur in the genetic code of the mitochondrial DNA.
Okay. So for the third testing, you know, just to make sure that the audience is clear. So when they're testing you for your ethnicity, or you know, when they're doing that cultural test that a lot of people are trying to do to figure out where they came from, or if they have any Native American blood in them, or whatever you're testing for, they're using the female test.
They're using, yes, they're
It's
using
not
the
a separate-
mitochondrial, yes,
yeah.
they're using the mitochondrial DNA, and they're looking for little mutations or little things that change that will show them
Signify a different ethnic path.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So those are the three tests.
Those are the three tests. Yes.
Okay. So now that we have overview of the test itself, let's take a step back and let's talk about the test for a second.
Okay.
You know, there's a lot of misinformation going on around in reference to where the test came from, what it relates to, and how it's used. And so, you know, let's clear up some of the myths about that and figure out, you know, what's really going on with this test.
Okay. All right. Well, in 1981?
Yes.
Okay, 1981 is when they finally figured out the entire DNA sequence.
Okay. Okay.
And this was done in London. And it was really, placenta really was provided
Okay.
from a local hospital.
Okay. Cool.
And the placenta was from a European male in London.
Okay.
And this was the person that they did the testing on. They used the placenta and they did testing and testing and testing until they finally figured out the whole DNA chain. Okay, and which happened again in 1981.
Okay, so that was the first time in '81. It was the first time that a DNA sequence had been published
And totally completed.
Okay.
And published. Yes.
Okay.
And so it was published by Cambridge University in England. Okay.
Okay.
And and this person whose DNA that they used, it was called the Cambridge Reference Sequence, or the CRS.
Okay.
Okay.
CRS. We want to remember that for later, but the CRS.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, in the 1990s, they noticed that there were some little things and there, a couple of little hiccups that were a couple little mistakes that they wanted to correct.
Okay.
So they went back, and now what they have is an RCRS, which is the revised.
Okay.
It's just a revised version, but it's still using the original placenta, so nothing has really changed as far as that DNA sequence is is concerned.
All right, and so let's backtrack before we continue. So in 1980, Cambridge University, 1981, 82, they published the DNA sequence from a placenta donated by a European male. Well,
The mother.
I'm sure the European male, he donated his placenta, but nonetheless, you know, they sequenced it, and now we have a DNA of a legit DNA pattern. We have the whole sequence here,
Right.
And it's called the CRS, or Cambridge Reference Sequence,
Right.
And now we have the R, which is the revised.
The revised.
Nonetheless, this sequence here.
Yes.
Now
And this sequence is now what they call ground zero.
ground zero. Okay.
Right. And it is the DNA, that is the DNA that all DNA is compared to.
Okay, so let's pause for a minute because that matters.
Oh,
That-
yes.
It matters deeply. Now, and so so what we're saying is that someone that was born in 1981, around 1980s, DNA was sequenced, and this is the reference sequence that we compare everybody else's DNA to.
Yes.
So we don't compare it to, as I've heard some say, Lucy
Right.
or mitochondrial Eve. We don't compare it to anything beyond 1980. It starts at 1981 with that Cambridge reference sequence.
Right, that's correct. And most people do not realize that. You know, most people would think, because again, you would think that if you're doing this sequencing, that it would be done from the earliest DNA
Earliest, right, that they can
that
find.
you can find.
Right.
Okay.
Well, human
Now-
DNA.
Yes, human DNA. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, because
Well,
all,
wait
living
a second.
all living things have DNA.
Well, and just to hold for a second, for those who think that Lucy was used as the DNA pattern to sequence everybody, well, Lucy was not even human.
Lucy was not human.
So she was not a Homo sapiens.
She was not a Homo sapien.
So it doesn't.
So she preceded Homo sapiens.
And so she wouldn't even really. It really wouldn't even make sense for us to try to use Lucy's DNA patterns to sequence us.
That's correct, because there would be differences.
Right, because they're different
because she
species.
was not. Yeah. Yes, she was not a modern human.
Okay, and again, just to make sure y'all understand, Lucy was not used as the reference sequence to do the DNA analysis for your genetic ancestry.
Okay, and I also want to point this out, though. It says that that comparing, it would make sense to compare our DNA to the earliest human. All right, but it says, however, it says that is not how the research community has decided to approach mitochondrial DNA. The consensus within the scientific community is that mitochondrial DNA is always compared to CRS. Now, there is a testing out which is called the Reconstructed Sapiens Reference Sequence, okay? Which is called RSRS, okay?
Okay.
All right, but they use the DNA from the mitochondrial Eve. All
Okay.
right, not Lucy, but mitochondrial Eve. They do use that DNA, okay? It says, however, and this is also coming from the United States National Library of Medicine, they state, it is therefore neither necessary nor sensible to change the present reference sequence, the RCRS, in any way. The proposed switch to RSRS would inevitably lead to notational chaos, mistakes, and misinterpretations. This is what they say, and so this is why they do not want to go to mitochondrial Eve. They
Right.
just want to leave it at the CRS.
And this the United States National. Who's saying this?
Okay, this is the United States National Library of Medicine.
Okay, and so although it could be a better test out there that would sequence individuals from a better perspective, us as human beings, they're not going to use this test because it's just going to cause too much chaos.
Too much confusion.
Because they've been using they've been using this system for so long, we might as well keep it the same.
Oh yes, that's the 90s.
Since the 90s.
that's too long.
This is too bad. Well, let's before we go. Matter of fact, before we go, let me just point out that even that sequence system has its issues. Because that sequence, the sequencing where they reference the Homo sapiens, they're testing individuals from today's location and not necessarily the individual's location in ancient times, or as it doesn't take into account migration patterns of individuals.
Right, so they're taking modern humans who are, well, let's just say in Africa.
Okay.
So they're using the modern humans that are right in Africa in the areas today.
So let's say that they could literally test white African from South America, consider them African, and now the testing could be flawed in some way because this person is not necessarily indigenous to that part of the country.
That's correct.
And they're not taking that in consideration.
That's correct, and they haven't done that in anywhere. So in Europe, Africa, wherever, the
Americas.
people have traveled
Right.
over tens of thousands of years, and so if you're in a place today, it does not mean that your ancestors were there 2,000 years ago, 200 years ago.
Okay. Well, it's a lot more to discuss about this
Yes.
topic. So let's take a small break, and we'll be right back.
It's the same hustle, it's the same thing, the same tears on everything. Maybe one day we'll see we're one big family, like it's one kettle. It's the same sunshine, it's the same rain, the same struggle just to maintain. Maybe one day we'll see we're one big family, like it's one kettle. Yeah. Somebody found working fingers to the bone. Somebody got a cousin getting that thug feels alone. Somebody fam got weight on the block, AKs on the block, might spray on the block, y'all. Somebody fam still on welfare, oh yeah. Somebody on the grind for daycare, oh yeah. If you got thugging in your family tree, then somebody out there kidding me. Everybody saying it's the same hustle, same thing, same tears on everything. Maybe one day we'll see we're one big family.
Welcome back to An American Deception. We just got finished speaking about DNA, and we just went over a few things such as the 3 tests that they give, and we spoke about the reference sequence and when it was established and what they use as the foundation to test everyone else off of. Okay, so now that we have that background information, you know, we know that it's from this time period, from, you know, this European individual, and not from anything prior, you know, to her. Let's talk about the test itself and what they're actually testing for when they do each one of these tests.
Okay. Well, when they do the genetic testing, they are, and let me refer to my paper here. Okay. When you're testing, you're either testing the Y DNA or the mitochondrial DNA, which is going to give you information about your father's father's father or your mother's mother's mother. However, it doesn't give you anything in between.
Okay, so in between. You're following your father's father's father, and you're following your mother's mother's mother, but you're not hitting anybody in between. Please, you know, explain that for us.
Okay, so now, if you're testing your 4 great-grandmothers, okay,
right.
You and all your brothers and sisters have inherited the mitochondrial DNA from your maternal grandmother's mother, all right?
Okay, so
that's your grandmother's mother. The other 3 great-grandmothers that you have not contributed to your DNA.
As far
So that means that your mother's, you know, your great-grandfather didn't contribute.
Okay.
Your father's grandmother did not contribute,
Okay.
and your father's grandfather did not contribute.
Okay.
So none of those people have contributed to your DNA. However, if they, you know, so you're missing out on 7 of your 8 grandparents, great-grandparents.
Right, so they're not even going to test for anyone else. They're
No.
just going to follow just this one line.
Just the one line.
Ignoring the fact that in order for this one line to occur, you have to have had so many different branches of offshoots. You know, you have to have grandparents on both sides. You have to have great-grandparents that come from both sides of both of those sides.
Yes.
The family tree grows and grows and grows.
Yes.
But they're excluding the family tree.
They're excluding just about all of the family tree.
Okay.
You
All
know?
right.
So now, so if you take into consideration of your great-grandparents, all right, if your father's grandfather was a Native American,
Okay.
it's not going to show up in your DNA. Even if your grandmother's father was a Native American, it is not going to show up in the DNA testing.
Okay. Okay.
So again, so 7 of your 8 grandparents, great-grandparents, could be Indian, but it's not going to show up in your DNA test because they're only testing that one person that is the direct maternal line.
The further back in time we go, the more people they are excluding out of your out of your history.
That's correct. So if you go back as far as, let's see, your great-great-great-grandparents, you have 32 of them.
Okay, right.
31 of them
Will not be counted.
will not be counted.
Wow. Well, let's talk about this is only for the mitochondria, or is this for both the mitochondrial test and the DNA test?
And
I'm
the,
sorry,
the
and
Y.
the Y test. Yeah.
Well, it works the same way.
It works.
It works the same way because, again, when you're doing the Y DNA testing, you're only testing the father and the father's father, the father's father's father, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it is still doing the same thing. You are still omitting most of the people. And the thing is this, is that not only, now, again, we have to remember that when they do identify, well, let's say they're identifying someone as a Native American.
Okay. Okay.
And they call those little markers, they call them haplotypes, you know. And so now, if that great-great-grandmother did not have one of the 5 haplotypes that are designated as Native American,
Okay.
then they're still not going to be identified as Native American.
Okay, well, let's pause there for a second. And so they have these markers that they identify as being, which would identify someone from being of a particular culture or a particular area or region.
Yes.
And so as far as Native Americans are concerned, they have tested 5 groups.
They have identified 5.
They have identified 5.
5, yes.
Out of, and have they tested all of the different or various Native Americans?
Okay, well, see, that's the thing.
Right.
There were thousands of tribes when the Europeans arrived here, you know.
Right.
Even today, even as far as the BIA is concerned,
Exactly.
there's like 450 some, I do believe, tribes that are recognized tribes within the United States.
And that's not even going to include the unamalgamated tribes.
That's correct. It's not. It's not even including those, and they have not tested everyone from each one of those tribes. And so it's like, so we still don't know if they have identified all of the Native American markers.
Because they only have 5 groups for the Native American population itself. We have to question the test in the first place, because it's excluding some of us.
Yes, because again, they haven't tested all of the tribes.
It's excluding some of their own recognized tribes.
It may be. It may be. And until they do all of that testing, we will never know.
All right, well, let's go back. Okay, so now that we understand that, let's go back to the chart for a second, because something seems very, very eerily similar to me with respects to this conversation. And so we're going to go back. And, you know, let's go back to some of the colonial laws and discuss how this DNA test, to me, really represents a newer version of colonial laws. Let's speak about we could talk about the 1/4 or the 1/16.
Yes.
You know, we could speak about the 1 drop rule. And then, you know, and let's compare some charts. Let's compare a chart of a colonial law referencing slaves and its DNA test, and let's see how similar these charts are.
Well, really, if we talk about our great-great-grandparents,
Okay, right.
okay, the chart really looks exactly the same as the 1/16 rule that they had for Native Americans back in the early 1900s. There were legislative acts which stated that if you had 1/16 or more black blood or slave blood, then you were considered African in descent.
Right.
So again.
So you could have 15 great-grandparents that were from
that were Native
Americans. One that was identified as a Negro, whether and again, they could have been Native American, they could not have been, but just because they were identified as a Negro or a slave, or now you're African. And again, you know, if we put this chart next to a chart that's that will reference your DNA, it's the same chart.
It is the same chart, and it is showing the same thing.
And
it is showing that out of your 16 great-great-grandparents, 15 of them could have been full-blooded Indians, Native Americans, but because of that one that was identified as a Negro, that means that you would be considered a Negro even though most of your ancestry is Native American.
Yeah, and then we can take it a step further, because then you go back to that 1 drop rule. And again, the further back in time these DNA tests will take you, the more and more individuals they will leave out of your family history. And again, with that 1 drop rule, you go back any further and further, it doesn't matter to them. You know, if that one person is identified, no matter who else is in your family tree, you are who you are, and it doesn't matter to us.
That's correct.
Yes. All right. And so, you know, before we wrap it up, you know, this is something that, you know, I find it's sad, but it's real.
Yes.
And let's talk about what they do with these tests once they get these tests from you. I mean, do you want to talk before,
Well, it's interesting what we just recently ran across.
All right, so I mean, let's really talk about this. So, we have a couple of people on our that send us comments. A couple of people will send us their sequencing tests from places, Ancestry.com, some of the other places, and they, well, this is what my DNA sequence said. And basically, what you're doing is you're sending a sample of your blood to these organizations, and they're doing these testings. They test this against your blood.
Okay, well, not necessarily blood, because they can just do a swab.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
They could get your DNA
Yes.
from anywhere
Yes.
now.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're doing swabs now.
Okay. Yeah. So they do swabs now, and they sequence you, and they figure out who you are, and they send you back the test. What else do they do with these tests?
Yes, and what do they do with the results?
Yeah, what do they do with the results? And I take a look at it. Go look up online and see for yourself what they do with these results. It's in Iowa. They're talking about an issue where Ancestry.com actually gave their database to a police precinct that was looking for a murderer. They thought that they found somebody that DNA matched. They tricked him into coming back into the state, locked him up, only to find out that it was not him. And his father was the person that actually donated his, gave him a sample so that he can get his DNA sequence. And 10 years later, his son is getting locked up for a crime that he didn't commit, on a trick that the police precinct played against him off some false information that Ancestry.com gave them in reference to a DNA. So you got to really consider, not only who is giving you this test, what they're basing these tests off of, and what's their motive for giving you the answers that you are getting, but what they're doing with your information afterwards. You really got to be careful about what you are offering to the public.
You may not know where your DNA is going to end up.
And I'm sorry, but I'll have to say, just like I've found a lot of other scientists say, which is that, this could amount to some sorts of fraudulent activity on some individuals' parts, because they're telling you that they can give you something that they actually cannot.
Right, because they really cannot tell you your ancestry by just tracing only one individual out of the hundreds, and further back you go, thousands of people who are in your ancestry. There's no way that they can tell you all of that information.
Right. And so, I guess that we can wrap it up from here. I mean, we spoke about how the testing was done. We informed people, check it out for yourself, the CRS, the Cambridge Reference Sequence. That way you could figure out, for yourself how this testing is done, when it was started, what was the reference sequence, who it came from, and what the time stamp that it came from. We spoke about the Y test, the mitochondrial test, and then the Snp test. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. And then we spoke about how, this can actually, it actually is very, very similar, and actually can interchange with some of these colonial laws. It's like, again, like I said, it's like the new one-drop rule.
It's almost it seems like a form of genocide as far as Native Americans are concerned.
All over again, and a mental genocide, rather than that physical genocide. Let's just totally erase them by offering them things that are not proven, are not scientifically sound, and although we know these things not to be, we're going to sell them to you as they are, because it's capitalism at its finest.
Yeah, that's what America was built on.
Oh man. Well, I guess that's the end of our show for today. I think it was a really interesting show. I hope y'all learned a lot of information. We'll be back. We have a couple other shows lined up for y'all. We're hoping to be able to keep your attention. Again, remember, subscribe to us if you haven't yet, to our YouTube channel. Take a look at us on our website, which is indeed.edu.org. We have our Facebook page, InDigenous Education, Indeed. What else? Do we have anything else?
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. And email us. You can almost email us at AnAmericanDeception@gmail.com. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, or if you have any opinions for another topic for us, please let us know. We hope to see y'all soon again. Peace.
Peace.